the crowded buzz of the courtyard, beneath the sprawling oaks whose dappled sunlight danced across terracotta tiles, Dani felt the world tilt off its axis. She had always believed herself a careful architect of appearance, every gesture measured, every smile calculated, but in that instant she realized how thoroughly Andre's and her clandestine affair had unraveled. Chelsea's sharp gasp pierced the air like glass, and Cott's wide-eyed stare cut through Dani's heart with icy precision. Dani's breath caught, throat tightening as she fought the tide of panic rising in her chest. Time slowed. She saw Chelsea's pale face, the silent question lurking in her eyes. She felt Cott's searing scrutiny as if it were a physical weight pressing down on her shoulders. It had begun so innocuously. A stolen coffee in the empty art studio after class, the accidental brush of fingers over a paint-splattered table. But every stolen moment had become urgent, intoxicating late-night texts that blossomed into whispered declarations in the quiet corridors, clandestine lunches behind half-closed doors, fingertips tracing hidden maps on each other's skin. And yet Dani had thought herself untouchable, convinced that her composure would shield her from the fallout. She had convinced herself that Chelsea would never suspect, that Cott, her friend since childhood, would never betray the trust woven between them. Until now. Until Chelsea's phone slipped from her pocket, screen unlocked with a trembling thumb, and the messages spilled out like poison. "I can't stop thinking about you. You belong with me." Not him. "Meet me by the fountain at dusk." Each notification was a bullet tearing through the fragile membrane of Dani's carefully ordered life. Andre stepped forward, his usually steady posture betraying the tremor in his hands. "Dani," he said, voice hoarse, eyes burning with a feral intensity. The hush that fell over the gathered circle only magnified the sound of his confession. "I love you," he declared, every syllable a hammer striking Dani's heart. But she could barely focus on his words, still reeling from Chelsea's presence and Cott's silent recoil. The silence stretched taut before Chelsea found her voice. "You too," she whispered, disbelief lacing her tone. "How could you keep this from me?" Her heart was a physical ache, and Dani felt a pang of guilt sharper than any reproach. Cott's expression was unreadably a mask of disappointment that cut more deeply than any accusation. As Andre's gaze locked onto Dani, something flickered in his eyes, something close to anguish. He stepped closer, closing the space Dani had tried to maintain between them. "I know we hurt her," he admitted, voice dropping so low Dani had to strain to hear. "I know we hurt you both." He gestured to Chelsea, then to Cott, and finally back to Dani, as if pulling invisible threads that bound them all. "But what I have for you, it's real." His hand reached for hers, trembling, and Dani felt the familiar warmth of his touch ignite a spark she had tried so hard to extinguish. It was Michaelmas daisies in high summer, sweet and bittersweet all at once. She wanted to pull away, to focus on Chelsea's tears and Cott's silent judgment, but her fingers curled around his. Chelsea, eyes glistening, lifted her chin with a fragile defiance. "I thought you trusted me," she said, voice cracking. "I thought we were family." Cott's gaze, more guarded, betrayed a swirl of confusion and anger. "You never told me this is what was happening," she added, arms folded over her chest, posture stiff with betrayal. A part of Dani longed to explain that it had never been about secrecy or deception, that every moment with Andre had felt like a lifeline. But words dissolved into the heavy silence. Instead, she stood rooted, Andre's hand engulfing hers, and watched as Chelsea's features hardened with sorrow and Cott's eyes flickered with rage. Beneath that moment weren't already charged with enough emotion. Andrew took a breath and blurted out the truth that shattered what little calm remained. "I can't do this anymore," he confessed, voice cracking. "I thought I could keep it hidden, thought I could protect you all. But I can't keep lying it to her, not to you, Dani." He turned to face her fully, eyes brimming with tears he refused to shed. "You're the one I want. I've loved you from the moment we first spoke in the library, and I'll love you even after the world falls apart." His words landed like wildfire, searing through Dani's confusion, igniting reckless hope in her chest. But almost before his confession had a chance to settle, a shadow crossed his face. His jaw clenched and his eyes narrowed with something Dani had never seen, the raw, bitter edge of jealousy. He pulled his hand back, twisting it into the pocket of his jacket. "But there's Bill," he snapped, voice low and dangerous. "He's still here, in your thoughts. I see every time you look at your phone, every time you mention his name." Dani's stomach lurched. Bill with his easy smile and shared history, the one who had been her anchor when everything else seemed to slip away. She had thought herself done with him, convinced that Andre's presence had stitched her heart back together. Yet in that moment, under Andre's accusing glare, she realized how much she still longed for Bill's familiarity. How often she replayed their memories in the quiet of her mind. The courtyard seemed to tilt again, that afternoon sun turning brutal as Andre advanced, closing the gap between them. Chelsea's gasp caught in her throat. Cott's wide eyes tracked every step he took. "You said it was over," Andre accused, voice raw. "You said you were mine." He seized Dani's arm, not harshly but with a possessive urgency that took her breath away. "But your heart is still with him." He spun her around to face the others, holding her in that unyielding grip. "Do you love him?" he demanded, eyes burning. Dani's vision blurred as tears embittered and hot slid down her cheeks. Her world had narrowed to Andre's furious gaze, Chelsea's betrayal, Cott's shock, and the ache in her own chest. She swallowed hard, voice trembling as she struggled to find the courage to speak. I thought I had moved on," she admitted, each word a shard of glass. "I wanted to move on." But memories, her voice faltered. Andre's grip tightened, and she flinched. "Memories don't just disappear." She raised her head, meeting his stare through her tears. "But that doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I don't choose you." His jaw slackened, tension rippling down his arms. The other three watched, breath held, as Dani and Andre stood in the eye of the storm. Chelsea looked away, blinking back fresh tears, while Cott's arms loosened as if she, too, were waiting for some resolution. Andre released Dani's arm, stepping back as if the act pained him more than it pained her. He ran a hand through his hair, gaze fixed on the terracotta tiles beneath their feet. "I need to know," he said quietly, "that my love is enough." The courtyard's chatter, students passing, distant laughter felt miles away. The moment expanded, every heart beating with the weight of what was to come. Dani closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, inhaled the scent of honeysuckle drifting through the air, and let the world crystallize around her decision. When she opened her eyes, they shone with uncompromising truth. "It is enough," she whispered. "You are enough." Andre's shoulders sagged in relief, but the tremor in his eyes remained, a reminder of how fragile love could be when trust lay shattered. Chelsea stepped forward then, voice soft but resolute. "I can't do this," she said, gaze shifting from Dani to Andre. "I need time." She turned and walked away, Cott following in silence. The courtyard emptied around them, leaving Dani and Andre alone under the wavering shadows. He reached for her again, this time gently, and pulled her into an embrace that was as much apology as it was promise. Dani buried her face in his shoulder, heart pounding with a mix of triumph and dread. They had confessed, exposed, risked everything, and the path ahead was as uncertain as the flickering light through the oaks. But for the first time, they stood together in the open, their love laid bare. Yet even as they clung to each other, Dani's mind raced with the ghost of Bill's smile, the echo of shared jokes, and the warmth of a past she had not fully relinquished. The love triangle that had remained dormant now roared back to life, each turn of its spiral more tangled than before. Andre's earlier confession weighed heavy. He loved her, but feared he would never wholly possess her heart. And Dani, torn between the comfort of memory and the promise of a new love, realized that the next chapter of their story would be written in choices made under the harsh glare of truth. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the courtyard in bruised gold, they stood at the gates of an uncharted future, love's edges jagged and bleeding into one another, and knew that survival would demand more than confession. It would demand courage. The golden light of late afternoon waned to a bruised violet as Dani and Andre remained in the hush of the empty courtyard. The echo of Chelsea's retreating footsteps mingling with the distant clack of clustered student chatter. The leaves overhead sighed in a gentle breeze, carrying the weight of bruised emotions. Andre's embrace tightened for a moment as if he feared she might vanish, then released her slowly, as though allowing her room to breathe beneath the straining canvas of their confession. They stood on a stage of their own maquinho audience, but to empty benches and the mottled tiles that had witnessed their undoing and their vow. Dani pulled back enough to face him, her hair falling in a tangled curtain around her face, cheeks still wet with tears that had not yet dried. "What now?" she whispered, voice cracking like old leather under pressure. Andre swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He pressed his hand gently to her cheek, them tracing away a remnant tear. "We keep going," he said, though his tone betrayed uncertainty. "We fix what's broken, or at least we try. If we want this really wanted to have to face the fallout," he paused, as if measuring the magnitude of the words. "Chelsea will need time. Cott will need answers. And Bill," his jaw tightened. "I can't keep pretending he doesn't exist." At the name Bill, Dani's heart fluttered in painful recognition. She had imagined that naming him aloud would send him scuttling back into the shadows of memory, but instead his presence filled the space between them with a silent gravity. "He's coming back," she admitted, voice small. "He told me he'd be away for the summer. Thought the distance would help. I wanted to move, Oni really did. But when he called last night, I froze." Her digits trembled as she smoothed back a stray lock of hair. "He didn't mention Chelsea or Cott or Good. He didn't know about any of this. He just asked if I still cared." Her shoulders slumped beneath the weight of unsaid promises. "So what do we do when he returns? Do you wait while I sort out old feelings?" She looked to Andre, eyes pleading, torn between loyalty and new beginnings. Andre swallowed hard, the tightness of his throat visible. He closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling as though he were releasing a held breath he didn't know he'd been keeping. When he spoke, his voice was low and raw. "I want to trust you, Dani. I want to believe that what we have is worth fighting for. But I'm scared. Scared you'll slip back into what was comfortable because it's easier than what we're building now." He reached out, fingertips brushing her wrist. "I don't expect perfection. I only ask that you be honest with me, with yourself. If Bill comes back and you realize your heart lies with him, then we each other the truth." He looked deep into her eyes, the dusk painting them in dusky rose. "But if you choose me, I need to know you choose me freely, without shadows of doubt." They remained locked in that fragile moment. The world beyond the courtyard, a blur of summer heat and the promise of endings. Finally, Dani nodded, as if making a pact with her own trembling heart. "I choose you," she whispered, though every syllable trembled with the residue of guilt. "But I can't pretend Bill never existed. I have to say goodbye to him properly, or else I'll never be fully here with you." She stepped back and wrapped her arms around herself, a sudden chill falling over her skin despite the warming evening air. "I'll call him tonight," she promised, voice hollow with nameless dread. "I'll tell him it's over for good." Her declaration hung between them like an incantation, uncertain but necessary. Andre nodded once, sharply, the tension in his shoulders easing fractionally. He reached to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "That's all I ask." He paused, searching her face. "And I'll talk to Chelsea and Cott. I'll try to explain Hesley we did what we did, and how much you mean to me. They deserve that." His gaze flicked upward to the treetops, shadow and light entwined. "It won't be easy. They'll be hurt. But I want them back in our lives, if you do." He exhaled slowly, as if exorcising the ghosts of sabotage and mistrust. "We'll rebuild, piece by piece." Dani swallowed hard, the tightening in her chest easing as she felt the solidarity of his words, however tentative. "Okay," she agreed. "Let's start there." Her voice steadied, infused with cautious resolve. Together they left the courtyard, footsteps echoing down the stone passageway as the sky above deepened to indigo. In the distance, heathen calls of evening birds flitted through the cooling air, as though heralding an era of uncharted challenges. They found Chelsea sitting on the steps before the old library doors, head bowed, hands clasped in her lap. Cott hovered nearby, leaning against the column, arms folded in a stance of wounded protectiveness. Neither spoke as Dani and Andre approached, The silence stretched taut. Dani halted, swallowing past the lump in her throat. Andre stopped beside her, shoulders squared, posture open. Dani exhaled, summoning courage, and stepped forward. "Chelsea," she said softly, voice quavering but clear. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Chelsea's head lifted, eyes red-rimmed, and Kat's gaze flicked between them with the expectancy that made Dani's pulse quicken. "I've asked Andre to talk to you both, to tell you the truth why this happened, and why I let it. But I also wanted to tell you myself that I'm ending things with Bill tonight. I hope you can forgive me." Eventually, her hands twisted in front of her, the small gestures of guilt she had perfected over months now laid bare. Chelsea's lips parted in a sudden, raw sob. She rose to her feet, shoulders shaking. Kat squinted as if gathering words. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, softly, Chelsea extended a trembling hand toward Dani. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she admitted, voice thick and wavering. "But I want to try." The words landed like a tentative promise, fragile yet laden with hope. Kat stepped forward then, placing a hand on Chelsea's shoulder, and glanced at Dani with guarded compassion. "I'll hear what Andre has to say," she added, tone firmer but not unkind. "Because if there's a chance to salvage our friendship, I want to know everything." Dani exhaled, relief flooding through her in a hot wave. Andre stepped forward, closing the shrinking distance. He looked at Chelsea, then at Kat, solemnity etched across his features. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'll explain everything." And as the four of them stood in the deepening twilight to wounded hearts seeking forgiveness, one confession yet to be made to a ghost from Dani's past, and the fragile promise of new beginnings, a single thread of possibility wove through the gathering dusk. Somewhere beyond the gates of their fractured world lay the promise of healing, if only they had the courage to walk the path together.